Welcome back to SIEVELESS. Today we have BBL fever. No. You cannot start a video like that at all. I get that you've got your fancy new Minecraft trailer graphics, but our content has to be sensible. We've got to introduce the audience slowly into the video, not just dump them right into it and terrify them like that. Mate, have you seen our titles recently?
This ore processing method is crazy. This item changes literally everything. This method makes AE2 so easy.
Yeah, but I'm sure this one will be different. You know, we're working on AE2 and things like that.
This new router mod changes everything.
You need serious help. Yeah, you're probably right. Welcome back to SIEVELESS. So the first thing that I want to be doing this episode actually involves something that we did last episode, and I got a lot of comments about this. And it's to do with our ore processing. Now, you did not see graphite in this barrel. You did not see graphite. If anyone gets that reference, bonus points. So the first thing that I want to do is change that so that we don't get graphite. Now, unfortunately, the auto smelt functionality of our block breaker is not filterable. So I'm going to have to quickly just turn this off. The way I turn that off is just pull out the disc. And we'll go into our emergency hatch here. Now, I've built the exact same setup as we've got here. The advanced block breaker in my hand over here. But this one, you'll notice, does not actually have the auto smelting option on. However, the one in here does. So what we want to do is place some of the inventory cable on either side and actually turn off this power bit over here. We're going to then add both of our advanced block breakers here and just make sure that they're occupying the same space. So I need to move this one back one on the Z so it's in the same position it was earlier. We'll turn off the render area for that. Do the exact same for this. So they're now both occupying the same space. We'll pop them both on, let's say 5 ticks for now. We'll label those both up with power again, so they should now work accordingly. Now, we need to we'll pop in the auto smelter one into the left one, and we're going to deny coal ore and then deep slate coal ore as well. And that will basically block this thing from mining both of those ores, and make sure that's set to the deny list over here. I'm then going to do the exact opposite and press allow and drag both of those ores in from JEI, and use the one without auto smelting onto that. Oh, now just before I do that, I also need to set the drops teleporter to that side over there, so all of the items will go into that barrel. Push the labels, and that should now power it. Perfect. So I've now pushed both of the labels. They're both now receiving power, and the coal is being mined. If I go into this chest, I should now see that there is no graphite being produced, and we're only getting that coal back. Great, that is exactly what I wanted. If there's any other kind of resource that we want raw, I will do that as well. I think for now, that is perfect. I will leave that be, and we can now start producing more coal rather than graphite that we're not going to use. Now, we might use the graphite later on for the extreme reactors, but for now, we're not going to touch it. So I wanted to change things up a little bit from last episode. I wanted to make something that's from a brand new mod from All the Mods Tend to the Sky, and that is the BBL Routers mod. Now, do not Google BBL tutorial. I found that out the hard way. This mod is created by Ben Law, the creator of such packs such as Techopolis, Seopolis, Skyopolis, etc. Really good mod packs. And so for that, we're going to need to use 2 importers, and an exporter here, and a connector. And this is going to basically replace our modular router setup. Now, our modular router setup works absolutely fine, so you can still keep this. The only reason I want to try this is because it's a brand new mod to the pack, and it has really nice options for transporting RF, fluids, items, even chemicals from Mechanism, and Source from Ars Nouveau. And so what I'm going to do is whack on the exporter up on the top over here, and we can now filter the items that we want. So I'm going to use uraninite, redstone, and coal from over here, and pop all of those in the filter slots. I'm then going to get one of the item upgrades, and this will allow it to transport items. Now, obviously, you'd want to get the highest one, the item upgrade 4, but that's a little bit expensive, so I'm going to go 1 down. So I'm going to get the item upgrade 3. We're then going to plonk that into the bottom slot over here for our exporter. So now I'm going to go upstairs to our reactors, and if I place importers on the back of them, I can then use the connector as well that we made earlier. Right-click that to add the importer position, and if we right-click the exporter, that will now add the importer to the exporter, and we should see items going from there all the way up to our reactor. So let's go and see if that's working as intended. Perfect, so you can now see it's getting the uraninite, the coal, and the redstone all in its particular slots. I can also do the exact same for this importer. And now that I've added both of those importers, I should now be able to just pull out some redstone and it will instantly stock both of those up, like so. So that's actually really helped us because the modular router only has this 1 buffer slot. So to do the exact same thing, we need to make a modular router for every single one of those. So that's actually quite a nice mod. I've never played with it before, but it's actually been quite pleasant to try. And since we're doing that, we can also just take away our modular router setup, because modular routers is still useful, but we can do that another time. I also forgot to do this last episode. I needed to add water to our reactors, because they didn't actually have any, which should increase the generating speed as well. Wow, that was really interesting what you were just talking about just there. I was totally listening. Anyway, I'm here to tell you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. But also, I just want to give a massive shout out to my first patrons. So massive shout out to Barry, Charlie, Lucky, Sizer, and Potter. You guys are amazing, and that's really helping me out, so thank you a ton. Any contributions that you make will really help me out, so if you fancy joining, there's a link down below. You'll get access to behind the scenes content and the supporter Discord channels, where you can see sneak peeks of what's to come for SIEVELESS. Transition! The next thing I want to work on is upgrading our miners. Now, we've currently got the ore miner Genie here, and the next level is the deep ore miner Afrit. Now, all of these things are pretty simple. We have the essence being generated from our Drigmies. Crying Obsidian is already being generated from our existing Genie miners, but these Echo Shards are going to be the hardest thing. There's a few methods to get them, but most of them rely on getting ourselves the Warden. Now, we can make a mob and pop him in our Drigmy farm called the Possessed Warden, which will drop those Echo Shards, as well as a bunch of assorted Skulk items, which we really need. The problem is we need Skulk to get him, so we're going to have to experience the Deep Dark. Now, in SIEVELESS, we have to use the Conjure Island Deep Dark. We've got a bunch of amethyst ready to go for this, so we can craft ourselves the Tablet of Conjure Island Deep Dark. I then picked up myself the Ritual Brazier alongside a fully filled Source Jar. I flew out 100 blocks or so and placed down an Angel Block so that we could build this far away from our base. I think here should be good. I'm going to right-click with our Angel Block, plop the Ritual Brazier on top, right-click with our Tablet, and then pop the Source Jar next to it as well. Punch out that Angel Block, and then right-click again. And now we get ourselves the Deep Dark Island. Ooh, spooky. That suddenly turned really dark. Now, we've got to be a bit careful here, but I've got a bunch of wool with me, and I've got a creature catcher. And if I craft the projectile break extract, I should be able to shoot at all these shriekers, which should hopefully stop summoning the Warden. I'll do it quite quickly. I'm also going to put F3B on because I've got a little cheese for the Warden when he comes out. But for now, I'm going to pinch all of these sensors as well. Perfect, so we don't have to worry about the Warden right now. And I can just literally pinch half of this island. Augmenting our break extract spell with AoE, I ended up taking up loads of Skulk. And then I revealed that there was actually another Skulk Shrieker hiding underneath one of the blocks. But you probably want to see at least one little mishap with the Warden. So we're going to summon him in by just standing on top of this Skulk Shrieker, and that should spawn him in if we do it a couple more times. There he is, and we'll literally just build around him like so, and cover him up. And that's the Warden dealt with. He's just going to suffocate now. And I don't have to do anything. See, this is really easy, and it's also incredibly dark. I could pull out this one white wall block and probably help this along a little bit. Whoa, okay. He does hit us. Easy peasy, easy. I got spooked from that hidden Skulk Shrieker, so I actually ended up tearing down the entire island because I did not want any mishaps happening. So surprisingly, that went really well. No hiccups this time. So we need to make the Possessed Warden. This should be really easy. We just need to plonk all of our Skulk in there, use our Book of Binding Afrit over here, sacrifice a cow, and we will get ourselves the Warden, the Possessed Warden. Now, I'm going to time one this, obviously, like I explained last episode, and we'll catch him in a creature catcher. Pop him in a containment jar. Oh, no, hold on. It would help if I had a containment jar. And just like that, I had officially jinxed myself. Luckily, the Warden stayed put long enough for me to go get a creature catcher again. And then we popped him straight into a containment jar. If I plonk this fella down here, we should soon see that we will be getting all of those Warden drops. Fantastic. We got a load of Echo Shards, some Skulk, and Smithing templates. That's really nice. But what we came here for was the Echo Shards. They're super useful. The first thing that I want to make is upgrading our Void Shimmer Goo into the Shadowpulse Goo. That's a really easy craft, and we can now make the next tier of alloy, which I believe is the Eclipse alloy. And that's pretty expensive. You have to use blocks of netherite to make the raw Eclipse alloy. So we might not be making that right now, but the most interesting thing that I want to make is the Time Wand. The Time Wand requires time crystals. Time crystals come out from the budding time crystal blocks. It's a bit like Amethyst or the Geors. And the way that we get the budding time crystal block is by using the Shadowpulse Goo with budding Amethyst. We've made budding Amethyst quite a few times already, and that just involves melting down Amethyst in our Productive Metalworks foundry. I should now be able to place down the Shadowpulse Goo on the floor like so, right-click it with Skulk, and pop Budding Amethyst over the side of it. If I turn shaders off, I still haven't enabled that setting, you'll see it will spread to these blocks. And that should convert them all into the budding time crystal blocks. But you'll see they start absorbing the energy from this dimension and turning a different color. Now it has to absorb energy from every single dimension. That is the overworld, then the nether, then the end, and then it will start producing the time crystals. The main challenge of this is that you can't break them with Silk Touch. You have to either use a cardboard box from Mechanism or the JustDireThings swappers. And this is where that Eclipse alloy ingot comes into play. But right now we're not going to be doing this. This will be for a later episode. For now, what we can do is actually just move these manually with cardboard boxes. Now, I found that if they're taking a little bit of time, you can get the growth accelerator, the cranked one, and then just crank it for a little bit, and within one turn, it already turns them. So we can just pinch all of these guys, break them with Ultimine, and then our cranked growth accelerator as well. And then we can just head into the nether. And what we can do is just place down our cardboard boxes like we had before, with the growth accelerator there, the crank on top, shift right click all of these guys, crank it once, and all of them will turn into the next tier. We also then have to repeat this in the end. I'll speedrun that step for you, but this was a little bit daunting because the Ender Dragon was still there, and I don't entirely know what happens if the Ender Dragon comes near. I think it would actually break all of those blocks. So maybe in a later episode we definitely need to slay the Ender Dragon. And these are the things that now produce the time crystal clusters. So if I now crank this again, we should hopefully get a few of these clusters growing. So this is a fully grown one by the looks of it. And if I harvest that, I now get this time crystal. Now, if you keep them in your inventory, you're going to find that you get a lot of slowness or speed effects. And so I'm going to pop these in my backpack instead to mitigate all of those effects. And I'm just going to crank this a little bit more so that hopefully we get a couple more of these crystals. And you'll see that occasionally after the growth ticks, it will actually go back to its first state over here and no longer have any juice left in it. So you have to do that whole overworld process, then the nether, then all of that all over again. And that's why automating this really does help. But right now, we can't really do that. Right, they are all depleted. So I'm just going to whack them over with a cardboard box and get out of here really quickly. So in total, we got 17 of those time crystals, so we can craft ourselves the basic time wand here. Because you've got wireless charging, that should automatically charge itself. There we go. And now we need to fill it up with time fluid. Now, if you look at the recipe for time fluid, what we need to do is drop a time crystal into polymorphic fluid, and we make polymorphic fluid by throwing the polymorphic catalyst into water. We did that for our polymorphic wand. Now, if I throw it all into the corner over here, both of those, I can just keep right-clicking, and it will instantly convert it into time fluid. And we've now got a fully charged time wand. Now, if you're familiar with the time in a bottle, you can shift right-click things to speed them up to its maximum of 256 times. Now, that uses stored time. The time wand does the exact same thing, but instead of using our stored time, it uses the time fluid that we created earlier. Now, obviously, we're going to have to make an automatic way of getting that time crystal, but I don't mind this being semi-automatic for a little bit. Great, so we've now got all of the materials required to upgrade our miners over to the deep ore miner. So I'm going to pull all of these guys out. Now, I'm not actually sure if they retain their enchantments, so this will be a little bit of a trial for me. But let's go over to our compact machine and test this all out. Now, I don't have a fully automatic method of doing this, so I'm just going to pop hoppers on top like so, and we will add all of the items required into these hoppers. And then lastly, I can craft all of my Book of Binding Afrits and pop them on top, and that should start doing it. Oh, we need the Afrit Essence as well, whoops. And if I pop the hopper over here, Afrit Essence, does that now work? Okay, right, so if you have all of the ingredients, it will then allow the book to be placed. So I should just be able to time on this. And that is incredibly quick. It does strip the enchantments off. That's a massive shame. Okay. So it might just be worth upgrading these guys to the next tier anyway. Is that doable? Is that doable? That is... In fact, that is completely doable to get the Master Miner married. We've got all of the things required minus the Nether Stars, so I think maybe that's the next goal that we do. Also, that time wand just sped up things so much quicker. That has just improved our lives tenfold. Great, and we have now fully filled up our fluid tank lava, so I'm going to take away all of this stuff over here. And this allows us to have a little bit more space for our next set of machines. And that is the return of our friend, the Simulation and the Loot Fabricator. Because we need to make ourselves nether stars. So I've seen a few ways to make nether stars, and one of the most common ways I've seen in Let's Plays is to use this Tome of Alkahestry, and I'd like to do that because we actually have almost everything to make it. However, one of the items to make the All the Mods star is the Wither Compass, and that requires a Wither Prediction, which comes from a Wither data model from the simulation chamber over here. So no matter what, we're going to have to make a hostile neural network for the wither anyway. So I think this is probably worthwhile doing now. So let's make ourselves a model framework. We already have the deep mob learner, I think. We have a bunch of this tinted glass that we need, and soul sand here, which is not hard to come by because we can just throw it on here and do that. And let's grab quite a few of these wither skeleton skulls. So let's train ourselves up one of those deep learner models. I might as well go into our compact machine and do this because I don't want anything going wrong. So let's make sure that we claim this entire area here, and we'll do this in a corner to make sure nothing goes wrong. For this wither cage, I did the exact same setup as I did in my second or third episode where I first killed the wither. But this setup is my favourite. It uses tinted glass from mob grinding utils, and the wither cannot escape it. We're going to right click it with the model framework, pop it inside my deep learner. If I pop that in my curio slot, you can see in the top left that I've got 6 remaining wither kills, and that will train it up to the basic model. So in total, we killed those 6 withers that were required for the basic model tier. Perfect, so that is the wither model upgraded to basic. I don't know how many more kills I can do of this. This is so slow and boring. And I'm glad we upgraded our power supply because look at the simulation cost over there, 2,560. Now, luckily, our generators are going to easily keep up with that, but that was something I wasn't actually expecting to be that high. So if I place my wither into the simulation chamber and grab ourselves a bunch of prediction matrices, in fact, we're all out, so let me grab a whole stack of them. I'm hoping that should train the wither in no time, and obviously we've got this time wand here, which will speed this up significantly. In fact, I might as well do it. A load. And we got our first wither predictions. Perfect. Now, if I pop all of them into my loot fabricator and click on the nether star, I will now be generating nether stars using our wither predictions. That is amazing. We are now generating nether stars really easily. And you'll see the more that we use this model, the more the model accuracy goes up, meaning that we will get a higher chance of these wither predictions. So we are generating these nether stars like crazy. We've already got 30. Now, off camera, I crafted myself an artisanal ritual satchel. I used this recipe down here. You can get the apprentice satchel and then upgrade it, but what this allows us to do is if I shift right click, I can add any of our ritual ingredients into this pouch. So I've got all of my chalks, I can add wither skeleton skulls or regular skulls, even the spirit attuned crystals like so. And if I go into the ritual that I want in the book, for example this Euphoria inverted tower, and press the show multi-block preview and pop it down in the center, I can then right click and it will store all of the ingredients back into my pouch that I used to make the ritual. If I then right click it again on this block over here, that will then place all of those chalks and items, etc. for the previewed ritual, and it will use all of the chalk's durability from our ritual satchel. Okay, so let's now upgrade all of our miners. I believe we've got everything. We will find out very shortly if we don't. And hopefully, if I just right click there, right, okay, it's now crafting. So let's plonk all of those in there and time one this up like crazy. Hell yeah, we're now getting the Master Miner Marids. In fact, whilst I'm working on all of this, looking at our previous book, we had Fortune, Efficiency, and Mending. I can add Unbreaking to that. So if I pop my Experience hatch and right-click it, I'm just going to print a backup of this book. And what is our best way of getting an Unbreaking book? We can get all the way up to Unbreaking 5. The Ender IO enchantment coming in clutch again. That is such an easy recipe. Let's make some of those. So let us plonk all of that in like so. Unbreaking 3, fantastic. Let's get that up to Unbreaking 5. The way that we'll do that is just by putting our Unbreaking 3 book here and printing another one to upgrade it to Unbreaking 4. Plonk those two together. We've got our Unbreaking 4 book. Do the exact same with this one. And that is Unbreaking 5. If I combine that with our previous enchanted book, we now have the perfect book to add to every single one of our Master Miner Marids. So let's generate 4 of those books and keep this one as a backup. Great, that is 4 of those books that we needed. And we're obviously going to need a ton of levels just to apply this to each of these miners. There we go. And let's go back down and place them in and see if this is all working now with our existing code. So you'll see it's now generating those ores, and you'll see it is getting some of those deep slate ores. Now we can currently keep up with the demand for these ores. Oh, I think. We should also get access to some of the ores that we didn't have before, mainly the deep slate ores. One of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to is the mining dimensional core pieces. And then somewhere in here, yeah, I saw this stellar arcanum ore, which will actually be really good because later on we can actually make this whole setup obsolete because of it. And apparently we're also getting ancient debris. I didn't realize. That's interesting. For now, I'm going to tweak the settings over here and change this 6,000 to probably 3 times that. But I might as well keep monitoring our miners because they might run out of durability but luckily you'll see they've got a lot more durability than the previous miner. So hopefully that's not the case, but I'll let you know, and I might tweak that code. If I do tweak that code, that will be available on my Discord server, so check down in there. Now that we've got all that set up, I think we should upgrade our applied energistics and get our storage up to par with the rest of our stuff. Right now our storage is a little bit scattered. We've got all of our ores down there. We've got a Drigmy farm all the way through there. It's really chaotic, so I think we can upgrade it. So the first thing that we need to make out of all of this is the crystal assembler. Everything here looks simple, apart from the extended machine frame, which requires entro-infused ingots. And that's not too difficult, but it requires the entro dust, which comes from entro crystals, which comes from a budding entro crystal block. And the way that we get that is by first crafting ourselves the entro seed. And so now that we've got our entro seed, we just need to get ourselves a fluix block. I'm going to grab our cranked growth accelerator here. Let's plop that down, plop the fluix block down. I'm just going to surround it with cobblestone so that only this side is going to have the growing face. And if I right-click with an entro seed onto this fluix block, we will now get the budding fully entralized block. I explained this a little bit poorly, so I'm going to use post-commentary to fix this. Basically, this budding block acts as one of those gears that we saw earlier, and similarly to the time crystal, it has a durability, meaning that this block will degrade into a regular certus quartz block. So we have to try and get as much entro crystal out of it before that eventually changes. If that does happen, we just have to plop down a new fluix crystal block and then whack an entro seed onto that as well. Okay, that's not bad, and you'll see that once that's finished, it will turn into a certus quartz block rather than the fluix block. So I'm going to do this one last time and hopefully get as much of this entro crystal as possible. Great, so in total we got a stack and a half of entro crystal. That should be more than enough that we need. And to make that entro infused ingot, we needed the entro dust, so we'll pop that in the crusher, gold, and then lapis. So let's make half a stack of that for now. Exactly the same as our fluix dust. If I just throw all of that down into this puddle, we should get the entro infused ingots. Yeah, check that out. And so hopefully we can now have all of those things to make ourselves the crystal assembler. Perfect. And for now, we're using 6 out of 8 of those channels from our P2P network. So if I just plonk that here and plop a pattern provider, that should turn that into 7. Yep. So we've only got room for one more, but that allows us to make some of the crystal assembler recipes. And if I export into that pattern provider, we now have that automatically working, and we can now do some of the recipes that are required for all of this. And there are a lot of recipes that we can be using in that crystal assembler. I'd also really like to get my hands on the reaction chamber here. That's from the advanced AE mod, and I'm going to plonk that up here and pop another pattern provider beside it as well. Now, both of these actually have some really interesting recipes. The reaction chamber is usually used to make fluix crystals or all these other things, and we can actually make our entro infused ingots this way. We also have the ability to duplicate our certus quartz by having 16 dust and 16 charged certus quartz, making 64 certus quartz, and I definitely want to be doing this, as well as a duplicating fluix crystal recipe here by using fluix dust and charged certus crystal. So I'm hoping we can use all of that to actually generate loads of certus quartz for us. Now all of that requires water, so we probably need to get ourselves an infinite source of water for our system. I think what I'm probably going to do is make the infinity water cell, which isn't too difficult at all. We just need that 16k crafting component, which I believe we can make right now, and 3 water buckets. Perfect, that is the infinity water cell, and to use that cell we need to have ourselves a ME drive and plonk that somewhere on our network. My best guess is this spot over here that I just cleared earlier and didn't tell you about. And we're also going to increase the priority of this because I'm going to store all of our infinity discs over here. So if I go into my AE system now, water should be here. I've got 2.1 billion water buckets, and the cool thing is that if I've got some buckets in my system, I can actually just left click and grab a bucket of water and right click to store that away. And now that we've got water stored inside our system, that does mean that we can use it for recipes with the reaction chamber. So if I go into here, for example, and add that recipe here, which allows us to use charged certus quartz dust, and water to create certus quartz crystal, I can also pop all of these other existing recipes in here as well. Oh, I also didn't add a recipe for certus quartz dust, so I can do that here by just encoding that recipe over here and actually just using the regular certus quartz crystal. And in fact, I'm actually going to change this recipe and make it in batches of 64 to 64. This means that we'll be crafting up big batches of certus quartz crystal. And if I pop my processing recipes over here, so that's where the crushing one goes, and I'll pop 2 in the reaction chamber over here, I now have all of my certus quartz recipes on autocraft. And I can craft myself an ME requester. If I pop that somewhere on my network, for now I'm just going to plop it here temporarily temporarily. Anything that I've now got an auto-crafted recipe for, I can now request that we reach a certain stockpile of it. So for example, certus quartz dust, regular certus quartz, and the charged crystal, I want to pop every single one in here and stock 512 in batches of 64. Now what that means is we're going to want to try and stock 512 of the certus quartz, and if we don't have that, it will craft 64 at a time to try and make up to that amount. I'm going to do that with every single one of these requests. And if I press submit on all of those, you'll see it's now going to start trying to craft all of those ingredients, where it's now using our CPUs to request and craft all of those ingredients. Okay, that's really strange. The reaction chamber itself actually requires power. You'll see right now it says device online, but if I pop the pattern provider over to the side of it, it'll actually say device offline. So I need to route another cable into the reaction chamber so that it gets powered. Maybe I'm doing something wrong here, but I don't entirely know why that's the case. Either way, we've got that set up and we can add our processing patterns back in. And if I re-enable my request star, we should now see that things are going in, and yes, we are now processing it. It now has energy, and I'll set the export side to make sure that we're just pushing into that pattern provider. Perfect. So we are now generating certus quartz and trying to get all of these up to 512. Apparently this does also allow for acceleration cards, so I'm going to pop some of those in there, and wow, that has definitely accelerated it a lot quicker. I think the crystal assembler can also have acceleration cards, so I'll pop them in there. I think the slowest part of our system right now is the advanced crushing factory, so I might pop some more speed and energy upgrades in there. And in fact, these are all green now, which I believe that means that we've now reached that threshold. We have. Wow, look at how quick that was. So the next one I definitely want to do is this recipe here where we can duplicate fluix crystal. Let's encode that pattern over here, and we also need to encode crushing fluix dust over here. I'll pop that in the reaction chamber, pop that in the crushing thingy over here, and let's request ourselves... Oh, you don't seem to be able to drag and drop into this interface. That's a bit of a shame. So I guess I'm going to have to grab both of those and request them like so. And I think we'll do the exact same, 512 in batch sizes of 64. Now, we are missing ingredients, which I believe means that we should crush up all of our remaining fluix crystals, which should turn that into fluix crystals over here. Great, okay, so that's now starting that chain process, meaning that we should end up having 512 fluix crystals in literally no time at all. We can even watch the reaction chamber just produce them like crazy. This is really cool. And yeah, after time-wanding the crushing factory, we are now generating fluix crystals so quickly. So we now have infinite certus quartz, infinite fluix crystal, and we can also, I guess there's probably something here. Yeah, we could also make infinite entro crystals, so we definitely have to try this as well. Now, I believe we're out of space on our ME requester. You can't actually drag this down. I think it only allows for 5 slots, so we'll have to make a second ME requester. But if I plonk that down on the side over here, we've got enough channels for it. I should now be able to add our recipe here to craft those, and our entro crystal recipe here. I'll change the size of these to 64 and 64. In fact, I also need to go and change this pattern here for the crushing of fluix crystal to 64, 64 and encode that. Pop that in the reaction chamber. And so we've set up the ME requester for both of those entro crystal clusters. If I pop all of that in, it should now craft those up, I think he said. Yep, that's now working. Let's boost this all, and hopefully that's also now producing loads of entro crystals as well. Yeah, it is. I'm going to let this run in the background, and hopefully by the end of this, we should have 512 of every single thing to do with AE in our system. Whoops, and something I totally forgot. I wasn't actually supposed to put the requesters on the P2P line over here. I was actually supposed to put it on the dense cable line right next to it. If you break these, they do lose everything inside of them, but you can use a cardboard box to transport them, and it will retain everything inside. We've finally now reached that threshold of 512 of every single one of these items here. So that will make auto crafting and everything like that a lot easier. I'll also encode that recipe to make entro infused ingots and pop that in the reaction chamber as well. I won't make that on autocraft, but it might be worth grabbing ourselves quite a few of that as well. Something that I really want to automate is the fluix ME cable, and more specifically the smart cable, because I think we can actually upgrade everything to be using the smart cable now that we've got infinite ways of generating the wool, and we've got the redstone and glowstone being generated by our farm. So I've now crafted every single one of those recipes, and let's go upstairs and plonk them in the correct slots. I do also really want to upgrade our molecular assemblers very soon. So let's try and make ourselves 64 of this smart cable and then 64 of this dense smart cable, which I believe we can afford. That's really nice. Great, so we now have 2 stacks, 1 stack of smart cable and 1 stack of the dense smart cable, and we can now upgrade every single one of our cables here.
4 hours later.
So I have completely reworked the cabling of this room. If I grab my network tool, you'll see that we've now got all of that dense cable running through here, and coloured cables do not connect to any other coloured network, but any of the generic fluix cables do. So you'll see this network here just uses the regular fluix cable and then connects into that blue network cable here. Now my factory room is going to be powered through this blue ME dense cable all around this area here. This orange network I've yet to determine, but this blue network here, if I just poke my way through up into the ceiling, the blue network is actually our crafting CPUs and our molecular assemblers over here. So that should split things up a little bit easier, and we're no longer using P2P to confuse things up a little bit. So now that we've got that all set up, I think it's important to sort out the storage once and for all, because right now we are relying on these chests over here that are already really full. And of course, if I go back downstairs, we've got a ton of these ingots and stuff that's been processed. And right now they're just sitting here. We're not actually able to use them in our system. We have to manually drag them back and forth. So there's a few ways we could be doing the system. I've got a couple of ideas and I want to run them past you first. The first thing that I want to create is a compacting drawer. Now, if I plonk one down here as an example, and I grab some golden nuggets and put them in the bottom right slot, you'll see that all of these are compacting each other. So nuggets to ingots and ingots to blocks. And this works with basically any of our blocks. So I've got this modern industrialization antimony ingots, and that works as well. So I'll give you a little demo of how this is going to work. I can use the storage controller, which is the exact same as the sophisticated storage one, but for functional storage. And if I pop a storage bus on the side like so, that allows me to interface with this block and pull in and take out of it. So the way that I'm going to have this set up is that I want my infinite disk cell to have the highest priority possible. In this case, I've just put 999. I want the storage controller's priority to be higher than my regular storage priority. Now, right now, our regular storage is just this storage controller hooked up to our storage chests over here. But eventually this will be a disk drive with all of our storage in it. But I want this to be the second highest priority. So in this case, I'm going to bump that up to, let's say, 10 for now. If I craft myself the linking tool and hold that in my hand, I can then right-click this drawer and it will show me the range of the storage controller. And you can see it's quite small. I have to place all of my compacting drawers in this space. However, if I open this up, I can add copper upgrades, which allows the range to be extended. Now, I've put 4 in there, and I don't know how that's going to look, so let's just go outside, and you can see this has expanded the boundary. Oh yeah, this definitely covers our entire base. Oh, that does way too much. I was not expecting it to do that much. Oh well. So I'm now going to create a wall of these compacting drawers just over here. And this will contain every single one of our compacted recipes. So for example, that is iron nuggets there, and that will allow us to have iron and iron blocks. Also, once you've set it, my advice would be to lock the drawer. You can do that with a configuration tool set to locking mode. And then we can add the drawer like so. Another little mini tip for you is that you can actually shift right click it to be on single or multiple mode. I'm going to select multiple mode, right click my first one, and then right click the last one, and that will add all of those drawers to my controller. I'm also going to add a second set of drawers over on this side around here. And this works for things that maybe don't compress down into nugget form. So for example, redstone or lapis. You can also do 2x2 recipes. So for example, quartz here, that works. And in fact, it might actually be worth putting down our certus quartz and fluix crystal here to get the blocks form of those. We can chuck down amethyst as well, glowstone, things like that. Really useful recipes like that. So I've got a decent selection of things hooked up now. A bunch of our metals all into blocks and nuggets forms, and then all of our single compactations. And the way that I can now fill up those drawers with all of our existing items is actually quite interesting. I'm going to need an ME import bus, and I'm going to make sure that I've got a lot of acceleration cards. I think I can get away with 4. And instead of having this storage bus connected to our storage controller, I'm actually going to pull that off and replace that with our import bus on the side like so, and pop all of our acceleration cards in. And that should put anything that matches our compacting drawers from the chest into the compacting drawers. You'll see it's now filling up all of our inventories here. And I believe that is now done because I'm not seeing anything move anymore. This gives us another little chance to check over and see if there's anything in here that I've actually missed. Oh, no, I saw something. Coal, that's one that I've missed. Also things like cinnabar and all the Zycraft gems. I think I'll leave them be for now. I also dragged my results barrel from our ore processing over to the storage and tried importing that barrel into our compacting drawers. The problem was we didn't have enough storage space to actually store all of the items from our ore processing. And so I popped the barrel back to where it was, and crafted myself up 64 diamond upgrades from functional storage. I also crafted up 64 void upgrades. So if I add my simple diamond upgrade to, let's say, our copper chest, you'll see that the max amount will increase significantly. We're now able to store from 512 of those blocks to 12.3k. Now, if we ever maxed out on that storage, I don't want any of the items going into the other parts of our system. I want them to always go into this system, and if there's not room for them, I want them to void them. And that is where this void upgrade comes in. It will try to input items. If there's space, it will put them in. If there's not space, it will just void them entirely. Now, I know that might seem wasteful since we're actually just deleting copper that we're making, but this makes sure that we never overfill our regular system. And if we do want to have more copper, we can just add more upgrades into our drawers. So for now, I'm going to go through every single one of these drawers and add void upgrades and a diamond upgrade. So we are finally going to be moving away from our diamond chests. I set the requesters to have really high numbers and waited like probably about 2 hours for all of these to fulfill. So we now have like 4,000 fluix, 8,000 certus quartz. I left the intro at whatever it was because it just doesn't really matter right now. We don't need that much. I've made 2 ME drives and I've used cable anchors to just make sure that it's just connected to this network over here using this controller face over down there. And if I plop both of those down, I'm happy leaving them at priority 0 because we're actually going to be removing our storage controller. But each of these ME drives can hold 10 slots. Now I could make I believe it's called the extended ME drive, this one here, which actually allows you to store 20 drives, but right now I think this is fine. And so let's craft our first batch of 10 256k ME storage cells. And yeah, this is going to require a lot of storage bytes. In fact, 18,000. I'm going to need to get a 64k storage component to actually just replace one of our existing crafting CPU storages. Perfect. I will go upstairs and just replace that by just right-clicking one of the crafting storages. We had that 16k one from last episode. I guess we're going to have straight away, we're going to have to move up to 64k. That lasted one whole episode. So let's craft ourselves 10 of those, and we can do it by the looks of it. It's going to use 3,200 charged certus quartz. I decided that instead of crafting 10 straight off the bat, I think I would do a smaller portion, maybe something like 4. So that I could see how many disks we'd probably need for the existing storage that we've currently got. Okay, so that is 4 of our 256k ME storages, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how we're going to be storing our items. Now, the bytes count is how many of the item we can actually store. Now, we can store a ton in these 256 ME item storage cells, but we're limited by types. Now, we can only store 63 types in this cell, and in fact, every single storage cell has that same limit of 63 types. Now, I believe JustDireThings is in here, which is the storage for dummies. So if you're used to refined storage where that type doesn't matter, use these disks. They're a little bit more expensive, requiring the netherite and amethyst, but that means you don't have to have any type limit at all. I personally don't mind the type limit, so I'm going to keep this on. We're going to be very wasteful with these cells because we can actually store a ton of the items, but we're going to be limited by those types. So despite the fact that we might only have, let's say, 2 raw cod, we could store thousands and thousands of cod using that one same type. So very wasteful, but oh well. We're generating infinite resources anyway, so it's not like we can just make more. But what I will do is I will pop my disks in here, making sure that the priority is 0 for this. And we'll do what we did a minute ago, where we pop the import bus in there and then add our acceleration upgrades. And we should see, if I go in here, all of our disks are now filling up with the bytes and the types. And if we look at the indicator, we can see that that yellow means that we're filled up on types but not bytes, which means we're probably wasting a lot of storage. Oh, and I thought that was going to happen. We have now filled up the type count for all of these disks. Okay, so our 4 disks have cleared out that top chest, half cleared out the second chest. Oh my gosh, we have so many items. How's it going to clear through all of this? I would actually say we're going to need the entire disk filled with 256 cells. And we're going to have to craft, how many was left? 6? Well, we can craft it, so I guess I'm just going to have to let that happen in the meantime. And whilst that's cooking up, we've got 4 out of 6 right now, so we've got a little bit of time. I was thinking of a way of how we can connect this and this to our system up here. And I realised we could just connect our SFM system up to our network using an interface to pull and push items. And so I want to try and run an inventory cable from our machines over there all the way into here. Now, obviously, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, and so I want to get myself a personal shrinking device. If I charge that up, oh, it's charging up from wireless. If I right-click this, I can now set what size I want to be. So I can actually set myself to be the smallest size possible and shift right-click, and I will now be absolutely tiny. I am literally 2 pixels tall. How crazy is that? But that will allow me to go under and through all of this stuff to try and get down to my inventory cables. And I'll speedrun this part just to save you the effort. I found out exactly where our inventory cables intersect with this line that I was building. And then I built more cables to connect us very close to our controller. If I hold my network cable in my hand, I can now see that connection. So we can see that I've pulled that inventory cable all the way up through to this main part here, right near our controller. And I should be able to pull down from here, grab that cable and pop that right next to here as an ME interface. So now that inventory cable is touching that interface. And I've got an idea for the code. I want to pull absolutely everything from here. Ow, thank you, Stellarite. I want to pull absolutely everything from here and put it into that interface over there. And I also want to take any remaining items from this chest that aren't ores. So here's my code over here. I'm now going to input everything without the tag C ores. So here we did all of the ores. They went into the placer over here, so they got processed. So we're going to do everything without that tag, meaning all of the remaining items. We're also going to pull everything from that smelted barrel and then output everything over to the interface. So we're going to pull our labels and click on smelted and set our smelted barrel over here. All of those smelted results are going into that barrel. We're then going to shift right click again and find the interface and select our ME interface up here, like so. And if I push my labels, all of those items from here should now be getting removed. That's amazing. All of the items from here should also now be getting removed. And I just want to check that no ores are going into our system. So if I just type ore, I'm not seeing anything that's ore related go into our system. These ones were already here. So we have now automated all of this barrel here going into our system. And I believe in that time that I was setting up that system, all of our storage disks are now done. So let's plonk them all in like so. And let's watch that fill up. I'm hoping that this disk will be enough to store absolutely everything that we've got.
Another hour later.
You'll never guess what. We've filled up the storage again. We got through this chest, this chest, this chest, and there's only this left. So I said screw it and filled up an entirely new ME drive with 256k storage cells, so that we should be done with our storage issues forever. Or at least this episode. And it is finally all gone. We can break every single one of these chests now. And now our storage setup that we set up as a temporary thing is now finally gone, and we can do something with this space finally. Oh, that's been so long. Also, one thing I remembered is obviously we are filling up our reactors using this exporter from BBL. Now, that's not going to work anymore. So I'm going to set that up again using our interface here. The cool thing about the ME interface is obviously we've got items coming into our system through it. However, we can also have items coming out. So if I export coal and set that to, let's say, 64, I can also do that with uraninite and with redstone dust, all set to 64, and I can reset up this exporter so that it pushes those into that system, because if I take out that redstone dust, it instantly restocks it. So I'm going to add that exporter on the side of this interface over here and filter all of those items, set the item upgrade to 3, I can right click, add that importer position, go all the way back down and right click on that exporter. Yep, there we go. So that is now completely restocking every single one of the items using the BBL routers instead. I'm also just going to add a speed upgrade 3, and that should hopefully just mean that it restocks a little bit quicker. But that's really useful. That's how you can use an interface to not only push in items into your system, but also take out. Also, I know full well what people are going to tell me. I'm predicting my audience already. Right, I'm going to grab my pickaxe, and instead of shift right clicking here for my drops teleporter, I'm actually going to use drops teleporter directly on the interface. I can now go back into my code and completely remove this smelted label over here. Shift click, which will fix the issues, basically removing all of those other labels that are now no longer used. And so now we don't even need this anymore. I can place some dirt in this spot and rebuild our network, and now we have a fully cleaned up setup. Unfortunately, there's no way to remove this barrel over here because we still need to use that to use the splitting up functionality. What a hectic episode, we finally got so much done. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, and hit the bell, and I will see you guys next episode. Take care.